My presentation is entitled World War II Defence Regulations, Minutes and Memoranda. I'm one of the lecturers here at the University of Hull, law lecturer, and my PhD spans both law and history. So I'm going to take you through my journey so far, interpreting specifically council and committee meeting minutes, police memorandum from the Second World War, while I strive to answer my overall question, which is, see, my slides can, just try to move my slides forward. There, okay. My overall question, the impact of the Defence General Regulations 1939 and 1940 on civil liberties in Kingston upon Hull. My planned thesis journey from the start has been to look at the creation, the language, the aims of the regulation, and then their interpretation and implementation before moving on to how they were reported and also their impact. Bit of background on the defence regulations. So 24th of August 1939, Parliament was recalled to the House of Commons from its summer recess to pass the Emergency Powers Defence Bill, which was the enabling act, the enabling piece of legislation which gave authority to implement these defence regulations that I am looking at. The act was originally only approved for 1 year. However, throughout the war, it was extended, and the regulations existed in draft form, but they'd been constantly revised throughout the interwar period, while Britain knew it was getting ready to prepare for war and be on a war footing. The defence regulations were amended several times throughout the Second World War, and the bottom point there that I make is by May 1945, some 377 defence general regulations had actually been created, so a vast, huge amount. Now, my thesis only considers the defence regulations 1939 and 1940. So I'm looking at around 105 regulations, but actually the actual true figure is nearer 222 because of the different subsections. And of these 105 regulations, they were split into 5 parts, which are titled Provisions for Security of State, Public Safety, Ships and Aircraft, Essential Supplies and Work, and General Supplementary Provisions. Now, this is where my first problem occurred, my first major obstacle I had to overcome. 105 regulations, it was way too many for me to consider, and my thesis is focused on civil liberties, for which it's argued that these defence regulations are not all concerned with civil liberties. So what I had to do is I used NVivo software to develop themes that come from these 105 sections. So what I did was I catalogued each regulation into one or more predetermined set of criteria, set of civil liberties that I had created from doing my research and literature review on what civil liberties were like during the 1930s in Britain. After I'd put the 105 sections through the NVivo software, there were some flashpoints, some hot topics that came out, and some patterns of these regulations. And from that, I selected expressions of opinion, movements and activities of persons and communication, passive defence measures and lighting restrictions, and then there was an overarching a hot point that also came out, which was extension of powers to local authorities. Now, under each of these headings, rather than having 105 regulations, I would narrow it down to around 30 regulations in particular. So, for example, expressions of opinion, there was Regulation 3B contained under there, which was regarding the control of propaganda during the war. 39BA, which was to do with the production and the distribution of disturbing reports. with regards to sort of passive defence measures and lighting restrictions. One that's I can think of is Regulation 24, control of lights and sounds. So I'd narrowed down from 105 to approximately 30 regulations that were quite specific with regards to how they may impact on civil liberties. Then what I needed to do was, before I could consider my focus on the impact of these regulations on individuals in Hull and the surrounding area, I needed to examine how these regulations were implemented in and interpreted at local level. So I looked at the legal framework that was set up during the early years of the Second World War. So you got there on the diagram, the government, that Emergency Powers Act. There's the defence regulations highlighted in blue. Underneath them, the Ministry of Home Security, Britain being divided into sectors, regional commissioners, police forces, town council and local committees, ARP wardens, and then at the bottom there, the general public, which is where my focus will eventually end up with regards to looking at the impact. So to look at the implementation and interpretation of these regulations, I chose to focus one of my chapters on within my thesis on how the defence regulations were worded, how the memorandums that were received by the local police force in this area were worded with regard to these regulations, and whether there were any changes or developments in the language, any explanation given to how they should be used. And also the same with regards to the town council minutes in this area and local committees, for which there were an awful lot. They were the minutes of the local committees and town council. So this is where my focus is with regards to this talk. So I needed to trawl through the archives. I was able to turn to Hull History Centre's council minutes, various committee meeting minutes, police memorandums, chief constable documents, and I was posed with the question of how to actually use them, how to treat these sources. Now, I knew that I would be undertaking qualitative research methods, some discourse analysis and some thematic analysis, because that would lead on from the NVivo work I'd done on an earlier chapter. But I also wanted to do some quantitative numerical research methods with this. I wasn't 100% sure what it would show me, if it would show anything, or if it would just be a useless waste of my time. But I'm going to talk to you about what I did there and how I did it as well. So, with regards to the quantitative research that I undertook, so just to put into context of the amount of information that I'm looking at, or I have been looking at. So, I only considered looking at August 1939 to December 1941. So the first few years of the Second World War. My focus was going to be Hull and the surrounding areas. That gave me around 1,000 pages of Hull City Council minutes to look at. So I narrowed it down from around 5,000 to 1,000 of council minutes. But there was also around 6,000 plus pages of committee meeting minutes and 636 police memorandums that I had to look at as well. So an awful lot of documentation. So focusing on the 636 police memorandums, and I'll show you a photograph in a minute of what one looks like and how I used it. I had to come up with a formula for what memorandum would actually make it through to the final stages of this study. So the criteria that we put together, or sorry, I put together, was to be an official chief superintendent memorandum. It had to bear the mark and or the signature of the chief superintendent's office. It had to have been sent to the Hull or the East Riding Police Headquarters, and it had to have been sent or received between the 1st of August 1939 and the 31st of December 1941. So any memorandums not dated would not form part of my study. Now, what was really useful was the memorandums that are contained within the East Riding archives and Hull History Centre's archives. They were complete sets. They were all numbered, they were all catalogued, and they were fully complete sets between 1939 and up to 1943, actually. But obviously my study here only goes up until 1941. So once I was able to establish a memorandum that actually qualifies for the study, then I could then catalogue them. So I had, I'd narrowed 636 down sorry, I'd narrowed around 1,000 down to 636 in particular. The information to be collected from them needed to be coded. So each memorandum, so the date of each memorandum that was received, I was able to put a code to. I was also able to put a code to whatever the focus was of the regulation, the memorandum. So each memorandum had a specific title, and whatever the title was what its focus was about. So I developed a coding table so they can see for focus. So if the title was to do with the expression of opinion, it was given a number 1. If it was to do with movements and activities and communication methods of individuals within the area, it was a 2. Passive defence measures 3. Other, so that was anything else that wasn't contained within those top 3, or to do with the admin or structure of the police force, or to do with air raids or homelessness. And then it was also given a secondary number depending on what date range it was received in. So say a memorandum sent that was to do with the movements of individuals in the area to the local police was given a code 2. And if it was received between February 1940 and April 1940, it was given a 3, so it would be a 2-3. So all of this written data became a big group of numbers within a table. Simple table on an Excel spreadsheet. There's a picture of what one of the memorandums would look like. So they all looked very, very similar. I was very, very lucky that the fact that each memorandum only had one single focus. There's the date at the top. You can see in the bottom left the official stamp of when it was received, the title there, which would help establish the focus. That one there is the order under Regulation 24, control of noise. And then you've got the main body there, that if there was any confusion about what code should be given with regards to its focus, there was generally something within there that would explain what what regulation it referred to. And so I had these data tables and I put them through the SPSS software. And excuse me for the very crude graphs that I've put together just from this. It was just to show you some examples. Basically, you get fired out a load of information, a load of data that you can then create into graphs and tables to look for patterns. So, for example, this one here, you can see that expressions of opinion and general admin and memorandums concerning homelessness, although they were received between August 1939 to December 1941, they never really varied in their fluctuation. However, you can see that the green line, the air raids, there was an increase in the air raid correspondence right up until June 1941. What was interesting was that the key focus for the memorandums to do with the regulations and civil liberties from the police force in this area was around the movements, activities and communication of individuals within that local area. And then it tended to trawl off as the air raids went up, and the police's focus clearly changed during that period. There are some examples that you get lots of information spread out, fired out at you from the SPSS software in regards to data tables and sets that you can use that hopefully you can see there. These are just some examples. I did the same with the council and committee meeting minutes data as well. Okay. I also had to undertake some qualitative research with regards to this. So discourse analysis, thematic analysis, language in use. And that saw me considering the changes in language. So I was able to not only look at it from a quantitative aspect and look at for patterns in the changes of focus and the importance of some memorandums and some regulations over another, and some what was mentioned within the council and committee meeting minutes. But I was also able to look at the development of how the power was distributed. With that, I discovered that the town clerk held an awful amount, a very important role with regards to the implementation and interpretation of the regulations. I'm conscious of time, so I'm just going to sort of start to draw to a close on some of my findings and some useful tools that helped me. So here's just an example of the changes of language and where it's used. So what I often found was that the police were given quite a lot of scope to interpret the regulations more locally with what they felt was important and the problems that they were actually coming up against. Because I did do some comparative studies with Derby Constabulary as well, which because all their archives are available and they're actually available online. And there was some interesting stuff with regards to that. There was actually harsher regulation interpretation around the showing of lights from shops and from vehicles as opposed to Derby. My assumption so far with regard to that is because of the Hull being targeted in particular because of it being a port. And then just finally, just to draw this to a close, some helpful tools that helped me and have helped me along the way. So obviously, as you can imagine, 1,000 committee meeting council minutes, over 6,000 plus pages of minutes for committees and memorandums. Seeing AI is that blue. These are all apps that are available on iPhones and you can download onto your laptop. Seeing AI, so I used that to scan any documents to read out while I was walking around. I could also email myself them, so they were written documents that it would interpret and be not interpreted, basically put down into text, so I could use that. The SPSS software, voice recorder to dictate my findings and be able to capture it. And then Everynote, which is the elephant one there, which was really useful to changing written language into text and also organising my time specifically. And then my final part is that I'm going to be going on to look at magistrates' records, newspaper articles, and some home diaries and things to look at the impact of these regulations. And I think I'm just over time. I'll have to sort of speed through them last bits.